Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome and thank you for being here to our members and officers, and welcome to everybody online, whether you're watching live or on a recording, to the Audit Committee meeting of Wednesday, the 23rd of April. We're here in the chamber room of Lichfield District Council House on a slightly different arrangement to usual. I hope that doesn't stop the free-flowing conversation and debate through the meeting. If we start with any apologies for absence.
Chair, we've received no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Sorry, we'll just try that again. The minutes of the meeting from the 27th of March 2025, and we will start with page 3, page 4, page 5. Show of hands to accept those. Thank you. I will sign those accordingly. Okay. And that takes us on to the first substantive item of the meeting, and that is the discussion with Lauren Hunt about the outstanding internal audit recommendations from PR and communications and capital strategy. Is that right, Lauren? Oh, sorry, Anthony, for the capital strategy. So covering those two items. I guess we could start with Lauren, if we could look at perhaps the first three items, which are obviously the significantly older of the items. I wonder if you could give us a brief rundown of the position of those, whether they are still relevant and worth keeping, and if they are, how close we might be to being able to complete those and sign them off. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Lauren Hunt, Marketing and Communications Director. I've been in post for around 5 months now, so I don't think I've met many of you. So I was made aware of these when I started in December last year. In terms of an update as to where we are, I think they all still need addressing and we are still working towards them. I came into a team where we didn't have any delivery plan, no real KPIs, and operationally we were very reactive. So a lot has needed to be implemented over the last few months. So priority-wise, since starting the role, it's been getting to know communications, spending time with the team, understanding the 2050 strategy that is now in place since these were put together, and obviously pulled together the first delivery plan for communications. So a budget has been drafted, which needs to be done by January 2025, and then the focus has actually been to pull together the first annual delivery plan for comms. So we've created a central calendar of activity with all of the priorities, activities to aim to have 80% of our comms planned for the year. This has been in place since the 1st of April, and the team are now delivering it. And we've also submitted new KPIs into Lichfield District Council's delivery plan around social media growth, engagement, newsletters, campaign delivery and events. And we're also submitting the first service delivery plan, as all the service areas are at the council. So I am aware that a longer term communication strategy needs putting in place. However, this takes time in a role, and I didn't want to implement an off the shelf comm strategy as soon as I started in the role. So it is still needed. I do think they need to be amended perhaps towards the 2050 strategy. I'm hoping to work on this year over the summer and go through the various sign-off processes in winter of 2025 and have a new strategy, long-term strategy, delivered and in place for April 2026.
Thank you. Mike.
Sorry, yes. New venue. Thank you to Lauren for the reassurance that she's given that things are in hand. It's a long time though that this has been sort of on the table. So, you know, I hope that you can complete what you want to do this year. Then there'll be the process of the service plans underneath. Can you tell me what the process is to get those service plans in place, please?
Yeah, so we do and will have a service plan for this year. So we've got a 1-year delivery plan, so we know and understand the priorities for delivery. In terms of going into next year, obviously we'll create a longer term strategy for communications in terms of our audiences, how we'll communicate with residents, what the priorities are, how all of that relates to the 2050 strategy. And as with many other service area deliverers in the council, we'll then create a service delivery plan for each year with the priorities, key dates, national days, campaigns that are needed. So that'll be within the longer term strategy.
I will just, yeah. So if I look at in total, I've got 13 outstanding internal audit recommendations in the table. I've got 0 high priority, 7 medium and 6 low priority. As of today, so the 7 medium priority, 2 are not yet due for completion, 3 are now complete and 2 are partially complete. And on the 6 low priority, I've got 3 that are not yet due, 2 are complete and 1 is partially complete. The longest outstanding medium priority recommendation is the one related to the capital strategy, and that dates back to September 2020. We've had that assessed very recently by internal audit as being complete because we've designed the template that was the recommendation and provided it to all asset managers, and we've had returns from all but one asset manager for asset management plans within their area. One thing I was going to say is what the review that we've done has highlighted to me is that my team have been completing recommendations, but unfortunately they seem to believe internal auditor fortune tellers. They haven't actually been feeding back, they've been completing them and providing the evidence. So there's a number that were done quite a period ago, but they haven't actually told the audit team. So we've now got those completed and assessed as complete by the internal audit team. That's all I was going to say.
Thank you, Anthony. Any further questions from members to follow up on those? Sue?
It doesn't necessarily relate directly to the Appendix 2 that we've got here, but it's a question that's been in my mind about using external funding for the capital strategy. My understanding is the capital strategy sits there and there's a budget associated with it. And I'm conscious of the fact that a lot of UK SPF funding that was left over towards the end of the last financial year has been used to buy some of the projects in the capital strategy. Now, I'm wondering how that works in terms of accounting procedures and you know what gaps there are now in well, hopefully no gaps in the strategy itself, but what available funding has now been released within the capital budget to allow other initiatives to go ahead.
I mean, potentially a question that's more suitable for the next item on the agenda. But Anthony, do you want to address that?
Yes. So the capital strategy is quite a high level document, so it sets some principles about how we will assess capital projects, how we manage them, how we implement them. Sitting below that is the capital programme, which has a detailed list of all of the projects. Now, from memory, all of the UK SPF funded projects either sat within the capital programme if they were capital in nature, or they sat within the revenue budget if they were revenue in nature. Now, I think what happened as we got nearer to the end of the financial year, which was the deadline for spend, where projects weren't going to be delivered by the 31st of March, that money was transferred to deliver other projects, some of which may well have been within the capital programme, some of which might have been new projects to use the funding. I don't think, and I'd stand to be correct on this, that it has actually created any additional funding needs within the capital programme or released significant sums to fund other projects within the capital programme. So they've either funded the project they were set aside to fund, or they've funded a new project rather than lose the money.
Any follow-up to Mike?
I've still got a question in my mind about if they've gone to fund new projects, what happens to the funding availability for projects in the capital programme that may not have the funds attached to them? I appreciate that perhaps this isn't part of what tonight's about, but this is part of, if you like, the strategic overview of the capital strategy, the way that we expend our funds. So it's just going under the surface slightly. Just asking the question, are there sufficient funds now to deliver the capital programme as outlined at the February council meeting?
Yeah, there is. There won't be any additional funding gaps as a result of the UK SBF changes.
Okay, so are we happy with that item? We've asked the questions we want to ask, in which case, Lauren, I'll invite you to stay for the rest of the meeting if you really, really wish to. Otherwise, you are free to go. Rebecca, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to bring committee's attention to the positive direction of travel that we've had in terms of outstanding recommendations. So you've gone from 103 at the start of the year back in April 24, and you're now down to just 86. So I think that's something to note. And similarly for the high priority recommendations as well, they've reduced from 15 to 2. So again, you know, we've drawn attention to this through this committee, and you know, there's been some good work being undertaken to implement those recommendations. So I think that's something just to point out. And I was going to say, Chair, just at paragraph 3.3, I've set out some criteria for how we're selecting managers to come before committee. Again, I think very much the last couple of times that we've done this, it's been on the sort of advice of the audit manager. So just to add a little bit of science to the process, I've set out those criteria there. So it's high priority actions, it's aged actions, overall actions per directorate, overdue actions, and of course there's a request of the audit committee as well. So if you're happy with that approach, folks, that would be great.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. I think that then gives us an automatic process by which managers would come forward, or depending on availability, but then gives us the option as the committee to make a decision to pull somebody in out of sequence, if you like. Okay, thank you very much. That's we're happy to adopt that. Yes, thank you. So recommendations, yeah, so we've reviewed the status, we've approved the proposed criteria, and we will then invite managers on that basis going forwards. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to item 5, accounting policies and estimation uncertainty. I believe, Anthony, that's your bag.
Yes, so I will go through this in a little bit of detail, but this report covers the key elements of the framework, the finance team and the wider council, because this does involve other teams like revenues and benefits, property, payroll, etc. We'll utilise to prepare the statement of accounts for 24-25, and the key elements of it. So the accounting policies. So these are the policies that we've provided by SITFA as part of their guidance. We've selected the ones that are appropriate to this council, and we've adapted them in some cases, minor changes. But so, for instance, we won't have picked a policy that includes foreign currency transactions because we don't tend to have foreign currency transactions. We don't need one for highways because we don't have responsibility for roads and things. So we haven't picked those. What they do is they guide the finance team and the wider council in the approach we're going to take to preparing the accounts. They also for anybody that's interested, help users to understand how the accounts have been prepared and how we treat certain items within the accounts. We've shaded all the changes to last year in blue, and really there is only one major change to last year. So this year, from the 1st of April 24, we're required to adopt international reporting standard 16 for leases, and the main change that impacts on for this council is the new waste fleet. So because we took delivery of that fleet just before the end of the financial year, we've got to account for that in the 24-25 financial year. The external auditors will, though, provide you with assurance that we are applying those policies correctly and consistency across the preparation of the accounts as part of their audit. So they will give you some assurance around that. A couple of other things I just want to go into. So there's another area we're covering is something called critical accounting judgments. So these are where I am principally making judgments about how we apply policies in the accounts, and they're the ones that might have the most significant impact on the accounts. Again, it also helps users to understand those judgments and the potential impact they might have. We've got 3 key critical judgments, one around how we treat the joint waste service in terms of assets, liabilities, income and expenditure, which we share between the 2 partners based on housing numbers. We also have business rate appeals and group accounts, and it's probably important to make the point here, and I'm sure external audit will just highlight this later, that it's probably for the first year we're going to have to prepare a set of group accounts in addition to the council's accounts. And just a little bit of knowledge around this. So group accounts, you compile them simplistically by adding together the council's accounts and LWM's accounts, but you then remove transactions between the 2 organisations, so you can get a consolidated view of both entities' financial position. Final area I just want to highlight is there's another area that we have to cover called key sources of estimation uncertainty. So there are a few figures in the accounts that are based on estimates. What this section does is it just explains to users what those estimates are, what the key assumptions are, what the impact of small changes in the key assumptions might be on the estimates, just so you can see how big the numbers are and how much they will change, where the estimates come from, and what assurance we receive to validate the assumption and estimates. Our key estimates are, again, business rate appeals, pension fund valuations, and non-current assets or property, plant and equipment. And we have experts that provide that information, whether that be the pension fund actuary or an external valuer. But in addition to that, we have sources of assurance. So that might be the pensions committee and pensions officers at the county just checking what the pension fund actuary is doing and setting the parameters to work within. And the same with our external valuer. We'll tell him the assets that need to be valued, the categorization of those assets, and he will then use his professional judgment as to how he does that. We will then have a double check of that when it comes back from the internal property team to make sure that there is nothing that stands out as incorrect when we do that. Final thing I just want to mention is that the report also provides an assessment of the council as a going concern, and that considers the challenging local government financial environment as well as forthcoming local government reorganisation. And my assessment, based on the information that we've put into the report, is that we've got no problems from a going concern perspective. We've got no financial challenges at this stage, and local government reorganisation is sufficiently in the future that it doesn't necessarily impact on the 24-25 accounts. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm quite happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, the going concern review always seems an odd status to apply to a council which isn't a profit-making entity. But I guess when we're applying global standards to our organisation, it's one of the musts that we end up having to try and force ourselves into. Any questions from members on this item?
Not a question, just a correction on item 334. The date when it went to full council was the 18th of March, not the 10th.
Okay, I'll pick that up. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I take your word for it without being able to consult diary, but yeah, okay, we'll make that correction as appropriate. Thank you, John. And the waste fleet change in Lisa, I think, has been telegraphed to us sort of months in advance. I don't think it's a surprise to any members. Thankfully for officers keeping us well informed as we approach this date. Thank you.
I was just going to say that's a very good example of where practical operational things impact on the accounts, and your knowledge of seeing a fleet of new vehicles thinking, my God, are we treating those correctly in the accounts, is valuable in this situation.
Thank you. Right, so
One I thought was interesting was the grand piano, and I just wondered whereabout that's stored.
The Garrick.
Interesting. So it belongs to LDC rather than to the Garrick. Right.
okay. So we have been asked to approve the proposed accounting policies. Can I a quick show of hands to show approval? Okay, thank you. Approve the council's approach to the critical accounting judgments, key source of estimation and going concern. A show of hands for approval of that. Thank you. And then on the final recommendation, delegate to the Director of Finance and Consulting. Oh yeah, the Chair and Vice Chair of Audit Committee. Sorry, there is one coming up where I think only mentions the Chair, but I'll pick that up later. And we're happy to approve that delegation. Okay, thank you. And that takes us on to item 6 at the annual report for internal audit.
Thank you, Chair. So this report at page 37 of the pack presents the annual internal audit opinion for 24-25. Members will note the high level of achievement of the plan at the year end. That's the 93% of the audit plan has been achieved against the 90% target. So this is some progress since the 44% we reported back to you in January, and also against the 59% that was achieved last year. So I'm pleased. The overall audit opinion is one of reasonable assurance. Of the 14 audits achieved, only 2 have received limited assurance, those being cyber and community safety. The remainder of the audits have received either a reasonable or substantial assurance. So what does that mean? Well, firstly, it gives confidence to the committee that our internal audit function is delivering. And secondly, that our internal control arrangements are generally sound. So take some comfort, committee, from that, please. The detail of the opinions issued to support the annual opinion is at Appendix 2 of the report. And just as an update for you all, there remain only 2 reports in draft as at today's date: community safety and housing benefit overpayments. The remainder of those detailed in the draft in the report have now been finalised. You'll see within Appendix 2, a lot of them were in draft at the year end. So a summary of those opinions will be included in the next progress report for you, but as committee members are aware, we do email those audit reports out to you as soon as they're finalised, but the summaries of those that we are finalising subsequently will be in the next status update. So I'm pretty pleased at the level of performance that we've got. Very happy to answer any questions. Thanks, Chair.
And again, another opportunity to note there's significant reduction in open internal audit recommendations. I do note your comment that this is likely to go up as draft audits are published. So it's it's a good point at which we reflect on that. Any questions from members?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a quick one, really, Rebecca, and that is that the tourism district and city not achieved. Can you just give us a little bit of background to that, please? Because that's something which is quite central, I think, to Lichfield as a district. We have lots and lots of areas now within the district which I think are becoming more and more popular with tourists, and something which we need to take account of. And I think there's potentially huge income stream at stake as well. So the fact that it's not achieved, can we just have some background to that, please?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, we were pedalling very hard at the year end to achieve the audit plan, and this was one that we just simply ran out of time with. What we proposed to do, and it did go within the draft audit plan for 25-26, we were going to carry that forward as we've done with another of the deferrals. When we took that to leadership team, we had the debate really about, and it's always about risk in terms of what we carry forward, etc. And I think the audit of climate change was something that we thought in terms of the council has committed to climate change. We set our priorities in relation to that, and that audit has been put in to replace the audit of tourism, councillor. So the plan was then, as it came down to audit committee, that was set out within the draft audit plan that was approved at your last audit committee. So it's based on priority, and that's not to say that understood your comments in terms of tourism and how important it is to us. It's just when you do have limited audit resources and you have the opportunity to debate which audits, you know, need to take that focus and that call on the resources. Climate change won out on that time, but it is part of the audit strategy. It will come up again.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rebecca.
Just as an aside, in the tourism district and city audit, would that include the policies on the pedestrianisation at all, or would that come somewhere else in the?
Chair, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, I might have pre-warned you, but they just occurred.
No. I mean, in terms of the scope, what we'd first look at is objectives of tourism in terms of what their service delivery is, and then the risks of not achieving that. So, if that did feature as a high priority within their strategy or risk profile, then yes, it would do.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on this item, Sue?
Sorry, I think there is a lot of good news, and I thank Rebecca for all the work that she's done. But I suppose in a sense this comes with the territory of being a member of the audit committee. You always look at the half empty bits of the glass rather than the half full. So those in the appendix that have got amber lights against them, there's community safety and as you've mentioned, and cyber security. I think the draft reports are there, but is there a timetable for when those reports are going to be back with internal audit with management responses, please?
Well, thanks, Councillor, for the question. So I believe cyber has been finalised, so you should have seen those responses back through in an email that went out to the audit committee, and a summary of that report will come in the next progress report. Now, as it's received limited assurance, we aim to follow those up within 6 months of the closure of that report, so it's a prompt follow-up, so you'll be getting that within the new follow-up report that comes through to you that committee has requested, comes to every meeting now. In terms of community safety, that draft is just due to go out, so the field work has been completed. So we will aim to have the responses back within, I mean, in terms of the PIs that we work to, within sort of 5 to 10 days. So that report will be winging its way around to you as soon as it's finalised, Councillor, so you will see that one too. But for your assurance purposes, as they are limited, we do look at them very closely in terms of that follow-up, following the limited assurance follow-up process. So it will be reported back to you, so you'll get assurance that, you know, they are taking the action that they need to do on that. But I think we've had that discussion with cyber previously, because the risk is so volatile and change so frequently. I don't know an organisation that's had a substantial or even a reasonable assurance on cyber because of the nature of the beast. So
I think that in itself is reassuring, in the sense that we're not an outlier in terms of cyber security. But thank you for that.
Any further questions? No. Okay. So we have reviewed the annual report as recommended, and that takes us on to item 7. Report of the Chair of Audit's committee's annual report to council. This is my report that I'll present to council at the next full council. Rebecca, are you?
Absolutely, Councillor. If you'd like me to introduce this one for you. So this is your annual report committee, and as members will recall from when we did the Audit Committee Effectiveness Review, SIPA recommend that audit committees produce an annual report to promote the role and purpose of the committee, to document our performance during the year. And what we've tried to do this time is make this slightly more impactful. We've added some colour, a photograph, and a points forward for the committee's focus in 25-26. So the chair has reviewed the report and is content with it, and has made some really good amendments as well where we needed to. So really this is for the committee to approve in advance of that presentation to full council. Thanks, Chair.
And in particular in the introduction, I have called on leaders of the various groups in council, without criticising those who have been unable to attend for whatever reasons, to try and select members for the committee who would be able to attend on a frequent basis. So that we don't run the risk of being in court as we have done several times, and that's a conversation we've had a couple of times between us as committee members. So I think I'm reflecting your views there. Any points from members? Sue?
Just a glass half full comment this time, and I think it has been good that there's been a consistent group of 5 of us who've attended pretty much every meeting, and that's been very positive. And you know, having been a member of the audit committee previously, I just think that we've sort of found our feet really, and that's partly to do with the additional training that we've had, so that's a positive. In terms of my response as a group leader, I think everybody knows that Councillor Dave Robertson MP was elected to Parliament last July, and it was therefore very difficult for him to attend to his duties down in Westminster and his duties up here. But you know, I'm in the throes of addressing that vacancy now, and in discussions with Will about a replacement. Thanks.
Oh, absolutely, and as I say, there is no criticism of those who haven't attended. I have no idea what, apart from Dave, I have no idea what circumstances may have led to that situation. Do we have any points on the substantive part of the report? No. Okay. We are asked to approve that report and endorse its submission to council. A show of hands. Okay, thank you very much. And that brings us to the risk management update, item 8. Rebecca.
Better. So the report at page 75 of the pack is your routine risk update, documenting the council's current risk landscapes as detailed within the updated strategic risk register. There are a couple of areas that I would like to draw your attention to on this report, folks. The first is a new risk appetite statement, and that's proposed for your approval at Appendix 1. So the council's risk appetite for some time has been defined as the red zone of the 4x4 matrix at paragraph 3.3. So this has been very much a one-size-fits-all approach to risk appetite, and whilst it has its advantages, it does give a corporate steer. It doesn't allow for any further sophistication when considering risks of different types. For example, a health and safety related risk may have a relatively low risk appetite threshold, as opposed to a commercial opportunity type risk which might have a higher threshold or appetite. So that's really what this appetite statement is there to do. Now, in November, as part of consideration of the new corporate plan, so the Lichfield District 2050 plan, it was agreed that the council would review its risk appetite, and so that's what we have done. The leadership team have considered the appetite statement in some detail, and the final proposal, as I say, is at Appendix 1 for your approval. But in summary, the leadership team really wanted the appetite to reflect where we are in line with Lichfield District 2050. Hungry for opportunity, as set out in the narrative commentary attached to Appendix 1. So examples of this are the development of the incubator units for businesses, private medical care for staff offer, the cinema development, those sorts of things. However, for governance, cyber, as we've just discussed, and legal, we remain rightly cautious averse when it comes to our risk appetite. I wonder if it's worth me pausing there for any questions with regard to the appetite statement, or shall I go on, Chair? Whatever you think.
Do we have any questions from members regarding the statement? At the moment, okay.
So, other aspects of this report that I'd like you to pay attention to. We've undertaken a peer comparison of other local authority risk registers, so that's set out at para 3.7. Reassuring to know that our current landscape is comparable. I think there was the exception of 3 risks. There was the community cohesion, climate change, and of course local government reorganisation, which weren't currently on our strategic risk map. Leadership team have approved risks associated with local government reorganisation to be included on the register, and that is now there. At this time, risks associated with community cohesion and climate change remain as a watching brief on the register, but do not currently warrant their inclusion as strategic risks in their own right. So they're still there, they're at page 95, we've still got an eye on them. And lastly then, just a review of sub-strategic, so that's the service operational risks has been undertaken, and revealed that we do have some different approaches to risk management. It is happening, but in different formats across different directorates. Leadership team confirmed that we need a consistency in that approach going forward, so that's what we're going to be doing, and that we'll be looking at, or leadership team will be looking at the sub-strategic risk registers on a 6-monthly basis as part of their STAR chambers process. So you've got an additional control in terms of the sub-strategic level of risks there. So a lot going on when it comes to risk this time. Usual updates are on the register in highlighted in yellow. We've updated the corporate objectives in terms of the new Lichfield District 2050 plan as well. But happy to take any questions.
Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Just one of the questions really is highlighting the climate change, which of course is one of the 3 which has been talked about. In terms of risk, are we talking about financial risk, or are we talking about an inability to reach compliance with the rules? And also, do we ever do an analysis, if you like, of the cost-benefit analysis of the climate change implications as well? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, Councillor. In terms of when I reviewed this risk in other councils' risk registers, it is very much not so much from a financial perspective. I think it's not meeting the targets as set out when a number of councils proclaimed that there was a climate change emergency, and all of the targets then that sort of flowed from that. So that's sort of the risk that I see out there in the local government sector risk profile. In terms of leadership's discussion on this, and Anthony and Mark, please do come in if required. I think we have it as an audit on the audit plan, so we see that it does need to have that assurance associated with it. But I think in terms of the council's strategic objectives, it wasn't considered to be sufficiently not achieving those objectives, which would mean that it would escalate and need to be a strategic risk that would require monitoring. So I hope that answers that question, but not being a specialist in this area, that's all I can give you on that and that discussion that we had at leadership team, really.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think it would be particularly difficult to produce a cost analysis of protecting the district against climate change at this stage. I don't know whether that factors into our financial calculations, Anthony.
No, not at the moment. I think it's quite a difficult calculation. I mean, even if you went to look at the impact of flooding, for instance, because of river levels rising and not having the runoff from fields like you used to because of housing, that's probably quite a very difficult assessment to make at a local level at this point.
Thank you. Any further questions from members? No. Okay. Thank you. So I just have the one question. So the review of sub-strategic registers to be undertaken 6 monthly. So where does that? Whose responsibility does that lie with in council? Who would we be looking to in 6 months' time to let us know that the review has happened?
Thanks, Chair. A good question. I mean, I'll obviously be, or whoever takes over the risk role will be keeping that section within your risk update to the committee, because it's important that you understand sort of or get assurance in terms of that sub-strategic level. But in terms of the Star Chambers process, I think this is something that is very much Chief Executive, Chief Operating Officer led, and it would be a case that directors would then come to present before them their risk registers and receive questioning from those officers on that. So it's very much I guess a peer challenge in effect, but part of that Star Chambers process. So it's an additional level of control that you will have with this new system that's in place, as well as I say, whoever is responsible for risk going forward will be looking at those sub-strategic risk registers to ensure that they are being updated regularly and that they are covering the risk landscape within those directorates.
Thank you. Tom.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just looking at page 77 and well, page 78 actually, SR8 Government Change in Planning Policy, and that's highlighted as a red area. And I wonder whether this comes under the category of the old Donald Rumsfeld unknown unknowns, because it is an unknown unknown, isn't it? I think that's one of the problems with it. We don't quite know where we're heading in terms of the planning process. If you could just perhaps give a little bit more of background on that one, Rebecca, please.
Well, I think I have the risk owner in the room, Councillor, so I might divert to Anthony on that, if you don't mind.
So I don't think it's it focuses on things like achievement of the 5-year housing land supply. That's one area of it. And if we're not able to do that because of that increased housing numbers, if we're not able to do that, what the impact is on the council's ability to deliver its strategic plan, but how we would manage the impact of perhaps ad hoc developments taking place across the district. So there's that element, and that's quite a fundamental part of it, but there's the added element about the other changes that are going on in the planning world in terms of local plans, planning committees, all these sort of things, and what impact that might have on the council strategic plan moving forward.
And would it be the case that as time progresses and we address that risk, it's likely to move out of the red? That would be the hope, I guess.
Suppose yes. I mean, the key to a lot of this is probably going to be getting an adopted local plan, because I think once you've got that, you'll know the spatial strategy that's going to be applied. Government, in theory, if that's found to be sound, will be happy with that approach. So yes, it should address the spatial issues. You would still have the issue, though, that the housing numbers we're delivering would be much higher than we'd done previously, but that would be part of a planned approach rather than a more reactive approach that you get into with no 5-year land supply.
And sorry, Tom, I think you had a follow-up you wanted.
No, it's simply to say thank you.
Okay. So the recommendations are that we review the risk management update and actions taking place to management the council's most significant strategic project risk, which we've done, and that members approve the new risk appetite statement. Can I have a show of hands for such approval? Thank you very much. And we go on to the annual government statement, item 9. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So each year the Council is required to prepare an annual governance statement. It forms part of the Statement of Accounts. And as you'll see, the statement sets out the 7 principles of good governance as endorsed by SIPFA, and these are then further subdivided into supporting principles. The statement then sets out how these principles are embedded in the Council's governance framework. So essentially, it's a high-level overview and review document. It's about ensuring we have the correct mechanisms and structures in place and that these are working. And overall, it echoes previous audit findings that there are no significant weaknesses identified in the Council's governance arrangements. We've highlighted a couple of matters in connection with last year's governance statement, including the conclusion of the DWP audit into the Searchlight system. And for this year, the only one issue has been highlighted, and that was a delay in the publication of the pay policy statement. As an aside, but relevant, I think, an audit of the scheme of delegations and decision making has also recently been concluded, and this looked at whether decisions are being made in line with the delegation set out in the Constitution, and the outcome of that was a substantial assurance for the management of the scheme of delegation that there was a sound system of internal control designed to achieve the Council's objectives, and these controls were being consistently applied. So I think with that, Chair, I'm happy to take questions or comments on the contents of the statement.
Thank you, Mark. And this is the one that I got confused with earlier. In recommendation 2.2, that it is that the committee delegates the authority to the chair of the committee and the governance manager. In most other places where we are delegating the authority to the chair of this committee, we've tended to include the vice chair of the committee as well. Is that appropriate here, or can we make that?
Yeah, that's absolutely
make that amendment.
Yeah, we'll add the 2.
Okay. So I'll come back to whether we approve that as amended in a minute. Any other questions on the substantive report?
Question I've got is on the appendix, page 108. It seems like a sort of perhaps too extreme a statement. The second bullet point down on page 108, it says all elected members follow the model code of conduct supported by training. And I'm not sure quite the statement quite captures the reality that, you know, the council encourages all members to follow the model code of conduct, and particularly sort of group leaders will encourage that, but we can't actually state that all members do, because, you know, there are occasional standards complaints and so on, but I just think that might need slightly more nuance.
Yeah.
I guess that would be what we would aim for. That's the rule. That's the rules, and then the investigations are if somebody breaks the rules. So I'm not sure how else we would potentially word that.
I think, Chair, I'd say all elected members are encouraged to follow the model code of conduct, or words to that effect. You know, but I don't think the council can guarantee that all members do follow the code of conduct. Otherwise, there'd never be any standards complaints.
I was just going to say, if by adding the word required, it might solve the issue, because then we obviously take corrective action if it's not followed.
That sounds excellent. Does that cover the? Yeah. Okay. John.
Whilst it's true that training has been offered, it's not been taken up with any great degree of numbers so far. I think that should be recorded somewhere, that, you know, the training has been offered for code of conduct, but there's been nowhere near the entire council turn up.
I think it would still be true to say it is supported by training, in that the training is there. my personal experience when we were last on the training a couple of weeks ago, there seemed to be a good number of people of members present. Yes, you're right. Not all members. But I think it is still, we could still say it's supported by training, I think. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say I was unable to make the last one here due to the fact I had a very heavy cold. But I did attend the Teams meeting, which was the precursor, I think. And in all my years at the council, I have to say that that training session was one of the finest that I've ever attended. And I think all people concerned with that should be congratulated for putting on an extremely informative session. And I'm very, very sorry that I wasn't able to make the follow-up last week as well. But in terms of training, that was absolutely excellent. Thank you.
Mark, did you?
I'm just very pleased to hear that. There was a very good feedback, I must say, from both training sessions. So we're pleased, and also I believe the link was made available to the first training session, so members who weren't able to attend the Teams meeting were able to view it subsequently.
Sue?
Chair, I've got another couple of comments, if I may. One is on page 109, and it relates to the forward plan. And basically this is saying that we have a forward plan and that ensures democratic transparency and accountability. It isn't always the case, though. I think there should be some recognition that on occasions, albeit rarely, there are occasions when an item comes forward that's not on the forward plan, and I think there should be some sort of acknowledgement of that. And can I just mention my next comment, please, Chair, which is a couple of pages further on page 111, and it regards the Youth Council. It says the goal is to create a youth council that gives a platform to share ideas and suggest projects. Well, of course, we've had one youth council that sort of didn't quite operate in the way that was expected, and we're hoping for another sort of forum for young people to put forward their ideas will come out of the current review. Somehow there's something missing, that, you know, a first iteration of a youth council didn't quite deliver what it was expected to do, and we anticipate that a second iteration of some sort of forum to engage young people will serve that purpose. Again, it's a bit of a nuance, I think, as much as anything.
Thank you. Are you suggesting we should be changing the wording somehow?
Far be it for me to change the wording, but you know, these are questions that jumped into my head when I was reading this, and it's just, you know, we can make everything sound perfect, and everything isn't perfect, and no council will ever be perfect. So some acknowledgement of where there are some slips from what we would expect on, you know, sort of optimal performance, I think is healthy, and, you know, acknowledges that, you know, we will do our very best, but we're not always perfect. You understand what I mean?
John, if I can come back to you, Mark, do you have? Is this?
Yes, Chair. First of all, on the forward plan, absolutely not all items will feature on the forward plan. Sometimes out of necessity, it's not possible to give the 28 days notice. There is a process in place for urgent items, which involves notifying the chair of the scrutiny committee. So there is a process, but yeah, not everything will always be able to get the full 28-day notice period, and then that's accounted for in the constitution. And absolutely, you know, youth council is a work in progress. It can be difficult to keep and maintain engagement, and that's why we're looking. It's evolving, I think. There's an element of challenge there, but we're committed to finding the right solution for that. Hence the sort of extensive engagement that's been going on over the past few months to see. It might not be that young people want to meet in the same format that, you know, in the sort of normal meeting format. There's other options out there, and it's very much about developing something in consultation with young people as to what will work for them. So I think Councillor Wood was right to highlight the fact that there's a challenge there. It didn't take off from the get-go, but we are committed as a council to consult with youth, young people, to make sure that sector of the population is involved in the democratic process, and we will keep trying until we get that right.
It is, yes.
Okay, sorry. Yep.
I was just going to say, in the last edition of the LGA newsletter, there was a very good article by, I think it was Folkestone District Council, about their youth council, which seemed to have worked very well. So a chat to Folkestone Council might be worthwhile.
Absolutely, we're very keen to look at best practice from around the country, and I believe we have been doing that as part of this review. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Mark, can I just clarify what is the status then of the youth council that was established? Is it still established? Is it still going, or has it come to an end and we're using learnings from that to take forward a different model?
That's a statement. It could, if I could invite Will, because Will's actually been spearheading the the consultation process.
Thank you very much, Chair. So yes, the previous iteration of Youth Council was put on hiatus whilst we looked at the operation of it. A working group was put together to look at that. That working group has met a number of times, discussed youth councils with other councils, both unitaries and districts, to see what has worked well for them and what hasn't. And we have recently put together a series of options that have been discussed with the cabinet member, and they are now being formalised into a report to go to ONS, I think in July this year.
Would it be appropriate to mend this slightly then, in that the council had a youth council and learnings are seeking to establish a new, or something along those lines, seeking to establish a new one to take this area of the governance forwards?
Chair, yeah, that change of wording, yeah, that would probably reflect the situation as it is now, if that's okay with Mark as well.
Chair, yeah, if it's okay with you, if we come up with amended wording and we include you, copy you into that, and the vice chair, and for the updated, well, we can copy in the entire committee for that matter.
Yeah, that works for me. Sorry, Sue, and then I'll come to you, Tom. Sorry.
No, I thank Mark and Will for their responses, and I think, as an audit committee, we're under an obligation to be as transparent and clear as possible. And I think it's healthy for an organisation to recognise that, there may be some shortfalls in what our aspiration in terms of governance or aspirations are. So, that makes me feel more comfortable. I've seen statements from audit committees where you think everything in the garden is rosy, everything is perfect, when that's never the case. And I think that acknowledgement is really helpful. So thanks to Mark and Will for accepting those comments.
Tom, do you had a point?
Yes, please, if I may, on the Youth Council. If I could quote the words of Robert the Bruce, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Will, I know you've put a lot of work into that, and Mark as well. If it didn't quite succeed in the way that we'd hoped for, then I think it's important that we reassess it, but certainly don't give up on the idea, because I haven't been in a school environment for a very, very long time. But I think one of the things that can be missing from schools is an opportunity to have debating forums, etc. A lot of people who are fortunate to go to particularly the better universities, they will be very, very familiar with debating, etc. But I think giving young people that opportunity is absolutely vital, because in our daily lives, it simply doesn't exist for a lot of people to have that opportunity. And I think we need to be offering that opportunity to them. I really do. So I commend the work that you've done, Will, and also to you, Mark, and I hope that it continues. And I think that given enough time, it will come to fruition and will bear fruit. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith?
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask, how did the members of the Youth Council become part of the Youth Council? Did they volunteer? Were they elected? Do the local schools know about it? Well, that's the question. How did it all come about?
So through you, Chair. So the first iteration of Youth Council, the one that is now on hiatus, the way that we comprised the membership of that was we contacted local schools, those that then wanted to get involved and responded and engaged with us. They at the school elected, I believe it was 6 representatives from each school that was participating, and those 6 representatives from each school then collectively met here at LDC to elect chair, a secretary and a vice chair, I believe it was, at the first meeting, and then the discussions were led by them from that point onwards was the idea.
Yeah, I think we've pushed that conversation as far as we had. I don't think it's our remit to get any further into details. I think it's enough that we know the officers are refreshing that approach and should hopefully come out with a better youth council in the long run. Do we have any member questions on any other points? Oh, okay. So if we go back to the recommendations, with the change at 2.2 to add vice chair of the committee after the chair, and do we make reference to the slight redraft in for regard to youth council? Do we need to add a recommendation that delegate the authority for us to approve that? Yeah. Oh well, I mean it is included in there. The chair and vice chair. Okay, so we have the 3 recommendations: review and approve the draft annual government statement. Show of hands, please. Thank you. The delegation of authority to the chair and vice chair and the governance manager to make further minor amendments, which would include that on the youth council. Sorry.
Can I also mention the point I made about the forward plan, which Mark acknowledged that, some sort of caveat around not every decision can possibly be put onto the forward plan, and that can cause some difficulties. There was that I think you accepted, Mark. It doesn't always happen, so
yeah,
as well to acknowledge in there.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, I will. Likewise, I'll amend that and share the wording, but it will be words to the effect where possible, and then maybe make reference to the alternative urgency procedures.
Thank you, Mark. So a quick show of hands recommended to delegate that authority. Okay, thank you. And 2.3, we approve the local code of corporate governance for 25-26. Thank you. And that takes us through to item 10. Our colleagues for Assets, they've asked me to let you know we're formally changing the title of this item to update the external audit plan for the year ended 31st of March 2025. Slightly different item than is on the agenda. We have with us Azola and Cameron. Azola, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. So our audit plan, we initially presented in the March audit committee meeting. And there were a couple of things that were still pending there. In fact, not a couple of things, just one thing that was pending was the group assessment. When we had a look at that moment in time, we didn't have the management assessment of the group position because it was prior P4 year end. After year end, management have done the assessment also on a high level because the draft account will be produced in the next couple of months. Based on the discussion that we had, we came up to the conclusion that the group accounts are necessary, and 90% of what is in this audit plan is what was been presented initially, but we made some few tweaks considering that the audit plan need to reflect that we are doing a group audit instead of individual council. Our on audit scope and general approach, that's where we're indicating the main changes which is relating to the creation of a group audit. And we updated our audit plan from our audit file, which include a substantially a lot of part of the audit plan. And then we came up to the part where we needed to update our materiality. But due to the fact that the figures that we currently had is estimated figure, we found that it will make more sense for us to wait for the group account. Hence, you see on page 137, we have TBC, which is to be confirmed for the drop position. We're planning to do this immediately when we get the draft account when they are published. And the other bit that we had to look at was in relation with the significant risk, whether to indicate whether we need to add more than what we currently have. We looked at the both entities and we found that there's no additional risk that needed to be raised. The one that we already reflected the more applicable for both entities. Obviously, we will also consider whether any figure in the subsidiary are material and whether we believe there is a potential risk of material misstatement. In that situation, we then will need to do a full audit. But when we bring our audit findings report, we will reflect whether what work have we done on the subsidiary and what have we come up with the conclusion. If moving on to the appendix where we actually indicate the work that we're planning to do on the subsidiary. In here, we reflect that the listed account will be full scope, meaning every part of the balance sheet and income statement, including the note, will be audited. But for the subsidiary and the joint venture, we indicated that with specific scope instead of doing the full audit because not all the balances will be material for the purpose of our audit. That will depend on what is coming out of the group financial statement. Currently, the management team did provide us with the estimate, which is showing before a group and after a group. And we noted those areas where there's going to be significant balances. And we came up to the conclusion that instead of doing a full audit for both the subsidiary and the joint venture, we better off doing a specific scope. So once we get the final figures, we'll determine which balances that are relevant for the purpose of our audit. The risk on the next page, which is the last page of our report, which is on 152, we indicate there that the risk assessment that we already done on Individual Council, we revisited it, and there was nothing that pointed out that we needed to add any more risk. So those ones still stand. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So just for clarity, in the specific audit of the subsidiary, and those decisions are purely financial, just on the size of the numbers rather than and whether that's material within that.
We consider both financial and non-financial, which is the qualitative factors.
Okay.
And when we're basing our risk assessment, because mainly the reason why we will have a significant risk, some of those balances might not even become material. But when we look into those figures and determine that, in fact, due to the other factors involved, there's the reason that we need to audit that particular balance. But at this moment in time, after we have updated our risk assessment, there were no other qualitative factors that we thought that they are necessary for the purpose of our audit.
Thank you very much. Tom.
Chair, yes, thank you, Zola, for that. My attention is drawn to page 10, or it's page 138 of the overall report, but it's page 10, I think. The identified risk, the management override of controls, risk of material misstatement, very high. And then we've got on page 14, I think it is, where it's about the valuation of the defined pension fund, net liability asset, la-di-da. The inherent risk of material misstatement is high. To the layperson, which I am, I see the words high or very high, and I express a degree of concern. Am I right to do that, or is my concern misplaced?
I think probably you're right to do that, considering the fact that the management override risk is the risk that we can't rebut based on the fact that management can be able to override controls. When we're looking at the data that we get from management, we need to consider the level of, for example, what assets Anthony has into the day-to-day processes, whether that doesn't indicate a further risk for us. So when we're looking into that we look at what he's doing, consider the fact that he's the CFO of it. But when it comes to defined benefit, which is high, we consider the fact that there's an external expert that does look over this. So there's that level of comfort that is not only just internal.
May I just come back on that and say that I have every confidence in all of our officers. It's just that I see those words and I realise that they are, I don't say they're designed to create concern, but there is an element of concern when I see those words. But thank you very much for the explanation. Thank you.
And if we ever had to maybe identify something that is of concern, we had other level of reporting that we need to do. At this moment in time, it's based on potential.
Yeah, I think if I can, I think our assurance is the fact that it is treated as a high risk. You know, if we treated it as a low risk, that's when it would become risky. Okay, Anthony, you wanted to step in?
Yeah, so just on the management over overrides risk, I think you also need to take account of the operating environment. So we're a local authority. We don't own, we don't have shares, so there's no incentive us to manipulate figures to get better shares. There's no incentive for us to manipulate figures to increase share values for a buyout or a merger and things like that. I don't get a bonus, so there's no incentive for me to manipulate profit figures. So whilst this is the risk as stated here, I do think sometimes we just need to raise ourselves up and look at the environment we're operating in and what the motivations and risks are. And there is very little, if any, risk for me or the leadership team to manipulate figures for our own or some sort of financial benefit. So that's all I was going to say to that.
Thank you. I think Rebecca wanted to come in first, and then I'll come back to you.
Thanks, Chair. Having floated around a number of audit committees, I've seen this risk on every single external audit plan. I think the key is that auditing standards require auditors to treat management override of controls as a significant risk on all audits. So wherever you go, you will see that. So I wouldn't be too concerned on it. Thank you.
Sue.
Yes, Chair, I think Tom was absolutely right to point out those levels of risk. And it's like I said on internal audit, as soon as you see a red or an amber, you're attracted to that. And that's what we should be doing, asking those questions. But I'm grateful for the explanations. And things have moved quite significantly between the last audit committee when we were talking about LWMTS traded services and the council and the relationship. So that's now included. So in terms of us overseeing that these risks are being appropriately managed, I think we can be assured that they are. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Any further questions for Azola or Cameron? No? Okay, thank you very much. So we have received that external audit plan. And we move on to item 11, the work programme. Always the shortest item on the agenda, it tends to be, outside of apologies. Any points on that?
We've come to the end of our cycle, and I have to say it's been really enjoyable working with officers and internal and external auditors, and thank you for your chairmanship.
Thank you, and Will was going to update members.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just to say a very similar thing that I said over in scrutiny recently, which is we obviously reached the end of this year's work programme for the Audit Committee, and very shortly I'll be contacting the officers involved in this committee to flesh out what the work programme for 2025 to 2026 will look like going forward, that we will then discuss in conjunction with yourself and the Vice Chair. And yeah, happy to take any questions on that.
Any points? No, in that case, I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you to those